ought to be in pictures. You're wonderful to see. You ought to be in pictures.
Hello and welcome to Deep Dive Movie Reviews with my friend Steve Hackman and myself, James Marsh. This episode we are talking Martin McDonagh's The Banshees of Inisherin.
Hey, but you know the drill. Before we set out on that adventure, if you haven't already subscribed to Deep Dive Movie Reviews, it'd be a great favor to us if you went ahead and did so. And then while you're there, ding the little bell. And that way you're notified every time we drop a new video. And just as a reminder, Deep Dive Movie Reviews does contain spoilers, so you've been warned. James, I'm so looking forward to talking this film. Let's do it.
Right, so The Banshees of Inisherin reunites essentially the cast and director of In Bruges, a classic, if I may say so, from about 2009. You got Colin Farrell, Brendan Gleason, and writer-director Martin McDonagh, who has previously found sort of Oscar glory with his film Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, from a few years ago. Just to set the scene, it's 1923. The Irish Civil War is in full effect, but down on the south coast, on the tiny little remote island of Inisherin, they are pretty far removed from the action. However, they face a bit of inner turmoil of their own when Colin, played by Brendan Gleeson, turns to his old friend Podrick, played by Colin Farrell, and says that he doesn't want to be friends anymore. Why not? Are you rowing? Has he said something when he was drunk? Apparently not. He just doesn't want to be friends anymore. So, and that sets the scene pretty much, but everything obviously sort of builds from that. So, Steve, where do we begin?
Boy, where do you begin with this film? Let me start by saying, this is so beautiful. I saw The Banshees of Inisherin right after I saw the new Avatar film, The Way of Water. And, we talked so much in our discussion about Avatar, about the beautiful visuals. This was so much more meaningful to me. Ben Davis, the cinematographer in this film, just shot such a visually stunning film that I was just enraptured by almost every scene. There was just the sweeping vistas of Ireland, the emerald green. I could take over Pandora any day of the week. It was real. It was tangible. Even though Inisherin is a fictional island, this was all filmed on location in Ireland. And even though it's such a small cast of characters, you could almost do this whole story as a stage play, even though there's a claustrophobic feel of everyone living on this tiny island, and relationships are small, and conversations are small, and relationships and friendships all are operating in this contained space. He opens this film up and gives you the space to breathe, and you get these ocean vistas, and you get these rolling hills, and some of the camera angles as we come out of doors that are all kind of claustrophobic in these very small, quaint cottages to open up into these beautiful, sweeping Irish coastal lands. I think I just have to start by saying how beautiful this film is.
Yeah, no, it is absolutely gorgeous. It's interesting what you were saying there about the sort of the theatrical nature of the film, because obviously Martin McDonagh's roots were in the theatre. He was a playwright before he started making films. And I totally agree that this is about a community where everybody, such a small community, where everybody is in each other's business. There's this one sort of superfluous character, the woman who runs the post office, who is all up in everybody's stuff. She's like, you didn't bring any news. Give me some news. I want some good news. And she opens everybody's mail and reads all the letters and all the rest of it, just because she's a busybody and a gossip, and she just wants to know. And when Podrick and Callum have this falling out over nothing, it seems to affect everybody around them, to the point that everybody from the barman to Patrick's sister to Dominic, the local gam, as he's called, the kind of village idiot, if you like. Everybody's
the priest's in on it in the confessional booth.
Absolutely, the priest and the local policeman. Everybody. This shakes the entire community, and I think that's where you realize that actually what McDonagh, the story he is telling with this, is something much bigger. Although it is a very, very intimate story just about these two characters, when you see the repercussions ripple through the entire community, you're like, oh, hang on a minute, this is about something else. This is about something much bigger.
Exactly, because being a spoiler show, we can say is there comes a point in this relationship when Colm, Brendan Gleason's character, is so frustrated at Colin Farrell's attempts to rekindle their friendship that he gives him the ultimatum that is just it comes across as entirely crazy. You know, if you approach me again, if you attempt to speak with me again, I'm going to cut off fingers on my left hand. And at first, if I'm honest, James, it kind of set me back a bit. Like suddenly I didn't like this movie as much at that moment, just for that brief time. Because as you know, a lot of my critiques of films is when something occurs that is so unrealistic without any justification for it, that it severs that umbilical of reality. I mean, in my mind, on all the planes of the metaverse, there is no plane of existence where somebody's going to chop off their own fingers because they want to break off a relationship. But once I kind of reset my lens and realize this is not telling just a linear story of something on the level. This is, as you're saying, is telling a much bigger meta story. This is about existential crisis. This is about what happens when a man, particularly a male, gets to a certain age in his life and he hasn't accomplished the things in his life he wants to accomplish. He realizes he has a set amount of years, a set amount of time left in front of him. How is he going to use that time? And if you haven't already guessed, I've had these thoughts in my head myself. So I found this film extremely personal. And so, yeah, that's why this film is, well, as we'll get into it, is an exceptional film.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a guy who's been pushed to his limit where he's realized that he's been wasting far too much of his life on trivial things. You know, and he has this great speech about, no one from the 18th century is going to be remembered for being nice. But then you've got people like Mozart, who, of course, you remember him for his music. To which Podrick goes, well, I don't know who that is. So there goes your argument.
Yeah.
Which is, brilliant. You know, and it should be highlighted as early as possible that this film is incredibly funny. There's a lot of humor throughout.
Thank you for
it does
highlighting that,
it does kind of sort of fade into the background somewhat towards the end, where as things escalate towards this kind of a conclusion that isn't really a conclusion that this is going to continue because neither of us is going to back down. Really, is kind of where it gets to at the end. But on top of it being obviously something about sort of an existential crisis and all the rest of it, you know, there are parallels about what's going on in the background. There are parallels about the Irish Civil War and the clash between not only the Protestants and Catholics but between church and state and things like that, you know, where you've got these relationships that have been ingrained in each other for so long, and then when one of them wants to sort of break it off, you know, the reaction to that, the response to that is aggressive and violent and confused and ongoing, and escalates to the point where no one's quite sure who started it or why it started, and they can only all they can see is, oh well, that we've got to see this out now. You know, this has to just keep escalating violently, and and that's where this sort of relationship goes ultimately. You know, the fact that he's willing to sort of self-harm himself in order to just get he just wants some peace, he says. And I love the way that the priest keeps asking, how's the despair? You know, he's obviously been dealing, and he's like, well, it's not great, actually.
Well, that's holding up a flashlight to society today, because we have a lot of, particularly teens, you know, I'm in education, and you have young people who are getting increasingly into self-mutilation. And as you begin to scratch the surface of why people are doing this to themselves, not just young people, of course, but it's often a sense of despair. It's a sense of not feeling anything. They want to feel something. And you almost can sense in Brendan Gleason's Colin character that he realizes he's been, in his mind, he's been whittling away his life in aimless chatter with dim-witted people on this island. And he wants to feel something. He wants to have something grand in his life, something worth, something that when he's dead will be remembered in time to come. And so I almost see the self-mutilation as a reflection on today's society of a people that have become dulled. In our case, I think we've been overstimulated. I don't think they're overstimulated on this island, but there is kind of a similar sense of every day is the same. Every face is the same. I eat the same food. I drink the same pint at the same pub with the same friends. And I need to feel something different. And so that was beautifully communicated in this film. It's really, there's so much depth. You know, a lot of times you and I can critique and complain that the films are not deep, they're not complex enough. That's not a critique with this film. I even feel at the end of a 30-minute review, I will watch this film in subsequent viewings and get new understandings of it.
Yeah, no, it's a deceptively sort of deep and layered story. I mean, because of course you can take it all at face value that it is just this kind of dark comedy about two friends, one of whom just has decided he's had enough of the other, that he's no longer sort of sees any value in their friendship. But
well,
the
James,
more
James, if you saw that way, I'd have to end our friendship, and because you're just too dim-witted. If you just
am I
saw
dull?
his face,
Am I dull?
I think we're having a bit of a row now. We're rowing.
Yeah. I mean, so the dialogue is so good. I mean, there's so much of the dialogue is just sort of simple riffing and repetition. There's a brilliant conversation where he's talking to the publican and the guy who just sits on the corner of the bar, and they're just repeating what each other said. Neither of them really wants to be the one to say anything bad, criticizing what's wrong with Podrick. But as soon as one of them does, the other one agrees with him, and so they end up just kind of like repeating themselves. And when he keeps asking his sister, you know, I think that's like a beautiful relationship in the movie. The relationship between Podrick and his sister Siobhan, played by Kerry Condon. You know, where they've kind of only got each other, but they both are aware that that's not enough. Yeah. And you know, one of the subplots is about Siobhan finally doing something about that, finally taking an opportunity, and obviously that's something that happened a lot in Ireland, you know, because of, you know, whether it was because of the Troubles or just for, you know, for other whatever reasons, just to getting out of the community and sort of escaping the community in order to find you know, something of greater value, and not getting kind of completely consumed by these sort of petty squabbles, if you like,
right
within the community.
And that's what happens, because we get that beautiful letter that she writes to Podrick explaining her new position and her new environment. And she even says, you know, the people here are not as mental as they are back on the island, you know, and basically saying once you come out of that bubble, you realize how crazy the bubble is. I mean, we've referred to before kind of some of the faith tradition that Tammy and I came out of is a little more evangelical fundamentalist. And it seems normal when you're in it, but then when you pop out of it and then you look back into it, you're thinking, it's a bit of a mental establishment there, you know.
Yeah, I mean, and to me, that's what Podrick represents. He represents sort of the church and a community that is run and dictated by the church, and that it's just repetitive, and you just go through the motions over and over and over again, and nothing is actually going to get solved. Nothing's going to actually get cured. But what's important is not solving the problems. It's just the support network of the repetition and of the community and of those relationships. And Colin just suddenly sees through all of that, and he's just like, well, this isn't giving me what I want, and it's actually preventing me from, you know, pursuing other creative outlets. And you're trapping me within a cycle that's just easy to control and is just meaningless. What does he call it? He's just like meaningless chatting, or he's like, no, this is good normal chatting. He's like, no, it's not. And for me, that meant just the cyclical nature and the routine of a community, you know, which is sort of overseen and run by the church.
Yeah, the flip side of that, James, though, is, you know, the idea that he sees this as just aimless, like being nice. Nobody's remembered for being nice. I have to be a little selfish now. And, you know, Podrick's kind of reminding him that wasn't aimless chatter. This is good, normal, healthy chatter, you know, chatting. And, you know, even in my own life, there's a point where I kind of went through this a little bit of a midlife crisis when I reached my 30s and 40s, and I wasn't quite where I wanted to be in certain areas and certain accomplishments that I'd had as a young man. But I had to come to a kind of a realization that it's the loved ones around me, it's the people around me that matter. And so, yes, I might not become the president of the United States, or I might not, become this big actor in Hollywood, or I might not, achieve some of these things that maybe I wanted to do as a younger man. But I've learned that the value of the relationships around me, and to learn to be content in certain and in certain relationships. And within that, I'm finding the mundane and the simple is much more fruitful than I originally thought. And I believe that's what Martin McDonagh is trying to communicate here, is that we can go and strive for this kind of memorable life, but it's actually in the mundane that we can celebrate, that we can find solace within the simple. And that's what I was picking up as a message in this, that I used to be concierge at a big hotel. We'd have these ice skating conventions, and you get these helicopter moms, and they would just sacrifice hours and hours, and the kids would lose their lives to become these great skaters. And realizing, in order to achieve greatness, you're going to have to sacrifice the elements sometimes of what makes life worth living. And where's the trade-off in that? Do we strive for greatness and maybe achieve it, but at the sacrifice of losing loved ones, losing friendships, losing a flourishing life? And maybe in Banshees of Inisherin, it's not taken to that level, but the same message is there. Am I going to stop being nice in order to achieve some kind of legacy for me? Or am I willing to kind of put my own needs, my own sense of need for greatness or legacy or memory, put that second to the relationships and the people around me? And I think that's what's being highlighted, at least in part, in this film.
Oh, sure. I mean, this is not to say that Callum is right in any way. I mean, I can certainly sympathize with feeling sort of stuck in a rut, in a grind, where you're not fulfilling your potential, and the desire to leave a legacy, if you like, while there is still time to do so. But obviously he goes about it completely the wrong way, and to the point where he is cutting off his own nose to spite his face. The one thing that he feels that he can.
The nose is not what he's cutting off, though.
Well, no, of course not. But the one thing that he feels that he can contribute is music. He's a quite accomplished fiddler, but then he is willing to cut off his own fingers and handicap himself to a point where he cannot do that anymore in order just to get away from the community that he feels is holding him back, which is this horrible contradiction that is very difficult to really explain. But I think the film lays it out in a way that you can believe how it happens, even if you can't quite sort of sympathize with it. It's one of those things where you just watch it unfold, and you're just like, oh my God, this is how people get into a situation like this, where they have sort of dug their own grave to some degree, just because they're so angry and passionate and feel the need to really sort of lash out in order to this sort of misplaced aggression. And it gets to the point by the end where Podrick burns Callum's house down, arguably commits an act of terrorism. And so it's almost falls to Podrick at the end, who's the one that says, this is never going to end. You've pushed me so far. You've pushed me away so violently, so far, made me feel so guilty about your insecurities or your frustrations, that now I'm kind of lashing out, and there is going to be no end to this.
But then there's this beautiful, humorous absurdity where, as the movie's finishing and they're having this row that, this isn't over. Oh, but by the way, thanks for looking after me, dog. Anytime, and it's like, of course I'd look after your dog. We're friends, even though I'm going to kill you. Doesn't mean we're not friends anymore. It's that kind of absurdity.
If you keep doing that accent, then we might not be friends anymore.
That's a, my accents always go Indian at the end. I always always.
But that's one of the beautiful moments of it is throughout the film. You see it a few times, like when Callum decks the policeman when he's giving Podrick a hard time, is that you see these sort of glimmers of the affection and the long-standing friendship or kinship between them. Mm-hmm. That when push comes to shove, when outside forces threaten their little relationship, however it may be developed, they will stand together. Kind of
yes, yeah. Which seems like a distinctly Irish trait as well. It's kind of a that tribal mentality. But I think this serves as a great jumping off point to talk about how beautifully acted this is done by Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleason, because at that moment, and I really highlighted that scene when, after Brendan Gleeson has basically ostracized him and told him, I don't want you in my life anymore, and called him dim-witted, when he comes to his aid in the scene you just mentioned, Colin Farrell looks up at him in the wagon and just starts crying. And it was just, it's so, the pain on his face just communicated. He didn't have to say a word. The pain. And I have to admit, I've always been hit or miss with Colin Farrell over the years. I thought this was brilliant. I loved him in this film.
Yeah, I think he is great. I mean, I've got to admit, I've always been a bit of a fan, actually. And I think this is arguably his best work, if anything, since In Bruges, which was his previous film with Martin McDonagh. So that's all good. And there is definite awards buzz around him, and I think rightly so. But I think the performances across the board here, because you've got these two central performances. I mean, Brendan Gleeson is always excellent, and I think particularly so here, to the point where you do kind of understand where he's coming from and what he wants, even if you can't quite sympathize with what he's doing. Right. But then you've got Kerry Condon as Podrick's sister, Siobhan, who I think is wonderful in it as well. Where she seems at times to be like the only woman in the village, apart from the sort of mysterious, strange hag-like.
Yeah. The actual banshee. I saw her as the banshee.
Sure.
She's the proclaimer of death coming. She is the banshee.
Right, but Kerry Condon, she's not afraid to stand up against everybody. I love the banter she has with her brother, the way that she sits there and earnestly spends 10 minutes sitting at the table convincing her brother, you're not dim, and he's like, and as she gets up to him, he's like, yes, not dim, not compared to you anyway, and she walks away, she's like, don't be so fucking stupid. It's a brilliantly drawn character, and she has so many scenes. I mean, she's the one that has the foresight, and the courage to step away. But then there are also moments like when Dominic, the village idiot, played brilliantly again by Barry Keoghan, who's always creepy and brilliant in everything. Yeah. Finally plucks up the courage to profess his love for her, and she's just like, oh no, no. Really, how could you possibly? How could you possibly? But does it in such a compassionate way, even though she absolutely hates him.
Well, again, she's the representative of nice and kindness in this. She can't understand Brendan Gleeson's posture in this whole endeavor, because to her, kindness and nice have to trump everything else. Like you said, Barry Keoghan pronounces love, even though there's no way in hell she would ever be. She would never. Yeah, I mean, remember when Podrick allows him to come spend the night, and she just gives him that look like, no, please. But she will never not be nice, and right. She's the constant in this film.
Absolutely, and I think she does it brilliantly. And as I said, Barry Keoghan's brilliant. I mean, his body language, how he holds himself, how he sort of wrestles with himself as he tries to articulate or tries to understand what's going on around him. I think there's a brilliant scene where it's taken as read that the Dominic is the dumbest person dimmest. They say dimmest person in the village by a mile.
Yes.
she says, and Podrick is worried about, but who's next? And then when they're sitting at dinner, Dominic comes out with a phrase. I think it's touche or something. He comes out with a phrase, or he quotes some poetry or something, which just for a moment gives the impression that actually he might not be the dimmest, and actually he might be smarter than Podrick. And it's never really addressed, but it's just left to hang there for a moment, and you just see the worry cross Podrick's face where he realizes, you just quoted something in French that I don't understand. That means you're smarter than me. And I think there are so many moments like that. I think the script is absolutely brilliant.
The thing that makes it hard with Colin Farrell, though, playing the dim-witted possible friend, is he's such a good-looking guy. You know, even on the island where they're kind of playing with his eyebrows and they're kind of trying to dumb him down, he's got that Brad Pitt. No matter how much you dirty him up, and Brad Pitt playing a pikey in Snatch, Brad Pitt playing a pikey in Snatch, he's still Brad Pitt, even though you're trying to make him look a little, dress him down. Colin Farrell just still shines on this island. He walks into the pub. Everybody else looks like a mutant compared to this guy,
Yes, yeah, he's been blessed, with good looks, and damn him for it. Yeah. But I don't know, he doesn't seem so out of place in this community, I think.
No, and I didn't mean to say like but you're right, he doesn't, and he plays it brilliantly. You never for a moment think that he's not Podrick of Inisherin, but he's still, he still shines in the looks department, even when he's got tattered old clothes on.
Oh, and speaking of the clothes, I mean, there is such a great line in collared sweaters in this movie. It's like everybody seems to be wearing these very sort of chunky knitted jumpers which have collars on top of them. And I'm just like, I was kind of fascinated by those throughout. I think the wardrobe throughout is like everything is kind of, it's just slightly sort of run down. You realize everybody's probably been wearing the same things for a long time, but they're good sort of chunky clothes to keep the cold out. And I really appreciated that sort of attention to detail as well.
Well, we live on a small island here in Hong Kong, and everybody knows each other. We're all in each other's business. I saw a little of the parallels here from Inisherin and Park Island. So
so who are you then?
Oh, I'm definitely not the most dim-witted. Not the most.
What we haven't talked about is
music.
Is Jenny the donkey?
Ah, yes, of course.
Who's absolutely fabulous. I think the animals in general throughout this, whether it's Callum's dog, or Jenny the donkey, or the cows and the horses, they're such a kind of integral part of Podrick's being. Yeah, and they're like the only things. They're his only other friends, really. He has his sister, he has Callum, and he has Jenny, the miniature donkey. And towards the end of the film, by the end of the film, he's lost all of them, and it's absolutely devastating.
That's really what flips Podrick is the death of Jenny. That's what in his brain suddenly, I'm going to kill this man. Because you've taken from me, you can take my dignity, you can take your friendship, you can take all of these things, but you took the one thing on this planet I loved. And now, and the tragedy in all this was Brendan Gleason was truly sorry that the donkey died. It was purely unintentional. It was purely an accident. But it shows you how things escalate. It's
collateral damage. It's collateral damage.
This film is a great exposition on when things get out of control. Things are misinterpreted. Actions occur that were unintended, which just escalate. And we see it around the world in bigger capacities. But on this, we see it in a little contained area of Inisherin. What happens when something unintentional goes bad, and it just goes from 1 to 100 in the DEFCON. Actually, DEFCONs don't go to 100; they go to 5.
They go to 5.
DEFCON 5. Yeah.
But isn't DEFCON 5 the best one?
That's right. It's DEFCON 1 is the best.
DEFCON 1 is war, right? It's nuclear war.
Yeah. We're launching the nukes now. Well, that's essentially what happened with Podrick. He went to DEFCON 1 suddenly and launched the nukes, which
he did. And he stepped it up.
Inisherin, he torched his house, hoping he'd die inside of it.
Well, he knew he was in there. He saw him in there.
Yeah.
And was and then the relief on his face when he sees that he wasn't, that he survived it. Which again, I mean, it's just such a a frustrating contradiction in their whole feud, is that they're lashing out at each other, but because they love each other, really,
right,
and they don't want any pain or the others to suffer in any way. And every time that they hurt one another, they kind of apologize for it, and they're sorry about it, and they'll go out of their way to protect each other. Yeah, and it's just utterly ridiculous. But it speaks volumes.
It makes me think there was a classic sketch on Saturday Night Live years ago with Mike Myers. He used to play a little shop owner called All Things Scottish. It was Scottish, not Irish. But Colin McLaughlin was the guest host, and they did a sketch where Colin McLaughlin was the son, and every time he'd say something that would irritate Mike Myers, he'd go, "Oh yeah, you've had it now," and they go, "Dad," and come, and they go, "I'm going to have that," and he goes, mother wouldn't say, "Oh, why did you have to mention your mother? Oh, I love you."
Well, maybe you deserve to be put through a plate glass window. Shame on you talking like that. You'd never be talking like that if Mum was around. Oh, don't bring up your mother, bastard. I love you. I love you, Dad. I love you. It hurts. It hurts. Oh, no, it hurts. It hurts me too.
And so this kind of celebrates that kind of
it's exactly the same kind
contradiction you mentioned, where at the end of the film, I'm going to kill you. Oh, but thanks for watching after my dog. Anytime,
Yeah.
It was such a perfect ending to the film, because it just lays the whole contradiction on a platter and ends the movie that way. I'm going to kill you. This isn't over. Thanks for watching my dog. Anytime. I didn't do the accent with it. It was tempting.
I was very grateful.
So, James, drawing this to a close, we've got to have a final score. We need an instrument. What are we going to use? I think...
Oh, it has to be fingers, doesn't it?
Fingers. How many, severed fingers
how many
are we going to give? How many severed fingers?
How many fingers are you going to throw? Are you going to throw at the door of this movie? Well,
all 5.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because just to tip my hand very, very slightly, I loved this movie. I've seen it twice now, and it's brilliant, and it says so much so simply, so easily, seemingly effortlessly. It can be enjoyed on so many levels. It is very funny. It is beautifully written. It is incredibly well acted. It is profound. It is heart-wrenching. It is tragic. It is sad, but and it simultaneously offers a glimmer of hope and sort of resigned tragedy simultaneously. And seemingly does it all so easily. I think it's great. I think it's absolutely fantastic. And I'm going to give it a full bleeding stumpy 5 out of 5.
The full 5.
The full, and that wasn't that just disgusting. When you saw it. And why he didn't pass out every 5 minutes, I don't know.
James, this conversation has had me rethink my review score on Letterboxd, because I gave this on Letterboxd, I think 4.5. And I'm thinking there is no reason it shouldn't get that extra half. I can't think of a reason why it shouldn't get the half, especially after this conversation. I'm thinking the one, I think it was the one thing I struggled with initially, and I've since worked through it, was the absurdity of the finger issue. I thought it was at first an over dramatic and over spectacle that actually diminished it at first. I subsequently rethought that and actually rewatched it as you did, and I'm realizing, no, this was done for a reason and for the purposes that we mentioned. So I'm going to retract my previous 4.5, and I'm going to give this a full 5. This is an outstanding movie.
Fantastic. Yeah, I couldn't be happier.
Yeah,
there are no caveats here.
No. Well, that's James and I's thoughts on the Banshees of Inisherin. But what are yours? Did you enjoy it as much as we did? Or I have heard some people who had some issues with this film that didn't like it quite as much as we did. Are you one of them? We'd love to hear your comments in the description box below. And just as a reminder, James and I are also on social media. So find us on Twitter and on Instagram. And those links can be found in the description box below. James?
Yeah, there is some awards buzz around Banshees of Inisherin. Do you agree with the hype? Do you think it should feature in the awards conversation? And if so, where do you think its strengths lie? Where do you think it's going to succeed? Let's say come Oscar night. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
I didn't realize Martin McDonagh. I knew he did In Bruges, but I didn't know he did Three Billboards, and I loved Three Billboards. In fact, that's
same.
one I wanted to go back and rewatch. It's on Disney Plus.
Yeah, no, that's a brilliant movie. That's a movie that left people slightly confused by the ending, but no, I thought it was brilliant.
Well, that's our thoughts. Until next episode. Bye-bye.
You're wonderful to see. You ought to be in pictures. Oh, what a hit you would be.